Okay, so today we're going to talk about testable versus non-testable questions. And our focus question for today is what makes a question testable? So, testable questions, these are a few criteria that they can meet. They ask questions about objects, organisms, and events. They're answered through investigations that involve experiments, surveys, or more observations. And they're also answered by collecting and analyzing the evidence or data. So a few examples of some testable questions. At what temperature does milk go bad? We could set up an experiment to find out at what temperature milk goes bad, making this a testable question. Another example, would more sunlight make the tomatoes grow faster? Another thing that we could test, if we set up an experiment, we could figure out if more sunlight would make the tomatoes grow faster. And then the last question, will fertilizer A grow taller plants than fertilizer B? Also a testable question. We could also set up an experiment for this that would show whether or not fertilizer A grows taller plants than fertilizer B. Non-testable questions cannot be verified with an experiment, but they can be based off an opinion. Usually, these are some type of opinion question. So an example would be, who makes the best coffee in New Orleans? Or who is the best team in the NFL? Something like that, where it can be open to opinions, would be an example of a non-testable question. When we talk about testable questions, they need to be written in the format, how does the independent variable affect the dependent variable, which we're going to also talk more about these variables more tomorrow. But this is a review, so you should know the independent variable versus the dependent variable, at least as a basis. So let's do a practice scenario. You want to see what kind of dog food your dog eats the most of. You bought a chicken, a duck, and a salmon and measured how many cups of dog food your dog ate each night for dinner. So our testable question might be, how does the kind of dog food affect the dog's consumption, or how much the dog eats? After we come up with a testable question, our next step is to come up with a hypothesis, which is a prediction based on an observation, and it also must be testable. When we write a hypothesis, we usually use an if, then, because statement. So if something happens, then something else will happen because, and this is where we would insert our explanation. So let's go back to our dog food question. You wanted to see what kind of dog food your dog eats the most of. You bought chicken, duck, and salmon, and you measured how many cups of dog food your dog ate each night for dinner. So once again, our question was, how does the kind of dog food affect dogs' consumption? So our hypothesis might be, if the food is higher in protein, then the dog will eat more of it because dogs are carnivores and can smell the higher protein amounts. Our next step after we form a hypothesis, we then need to design an experiment to test and collect data. So we formed our hypothesis from our testable question, and now we need to design an experiment that will actually test our hypothesis and then collect data. These are all parts of the scientific method. Once you've finished writing in your notebook at a voice level 0, in the silent hand if you don't understand, complete the worksheet in the shared folder named Testable versus Non-Testable Worksheet. Once you've finished that, if you have some extra time, you may move on to any extension work located in that folder on the science website.